So in today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can make these beautiful sugar calla lilies using florist paste or gum paste. So just condition your flower paste, especially if the pack's been open a little while. I'm just adding in a little bit of Trex and kneading it in. Trex is just vegetable fat and could also be called Crisco if you're in the States or elsewhere in the world. So I'm just kneading this in to condition the flower paste, make it nice and pliable so that it does everything we want it to when we're working with it. And you'll need to keep your flower paste in a airtight container, like a Ziploc bag, in between times when you're not using it so that it doesn't dry out. So I have an 18 gauge florist wire here, and this is going to make the center of the calla lily. So we're going to take a small section of paste and we're just going to mold this by hand. You can make different sizes. They don't need to be precise as long as they're in relative dimensions to the actual flower. So they're slightly pointed at one end and they get slightly fatter at the other. We don't want it too fine, but we don't want it too chunky either. So just, you can do that on your workbench if you want. And just use your veiner. We're using the Alderval veiner here. It's called the Alderval Arum Lily. So you can use this as a gauge for how big you want your centre to be, so that you're not making a load of centres that then are disproportionate in size to the rest of the flower. And I'm just going to take some excess off at the end. And that should be a nice, decent size there. I'm also going to pop a little hook in the end of my wire. And then just carefully insert that up your centre. Reshape anywhere that you need to, and then start to pinch it at the base to really connect that paste onto your wire. And we're just going to, as I'm just turning the wire and pinching and pulling off the excess paste. And at the moment, obviously that paste is super soft, so it is flopping around a bit, but don't worry about that, because as this is flower paste or gum paste, it will set nice and firm. So you can pop that in a dummy if you wanted for now and just leave that, or you can just pop it down on the side. It really doesn't matter. You can make these ahead of time if you want, and dust them before then you pop the rest of the flower around it. So for these ones, we would just dust them with some yellow. So you can see this one here. We've gone for the classic white and yellow with some lovely sort of spring green colouring to it. So you can leave these to set fully if you want, or you can work on them partially set if you're careful, but you might find it easier to dust them before you then wrap them with the rest of the flower. So to dust the centres, I've just got some buttermilk by Sugarcraft and added some white in just to tone it down a little bit. And these are just petal dust, so I'm just slightly brushing those on, and obviously if you want it paler, then just add less of the buttermilk in to begin with. Of course, you could start off with a paler yellow to begin with. Calla lilies do come in other colours as well, so please do Google them. There's some beautiful colour options there for your projects. Okay. So at this stage, that's all that requires. You can give it a light steam if you wish, just to set the colour. But just leave that to continue to set aside while we work on the rest of the flower. Okay, so I'm just popping a little bit of corn flour onto my board here and a little pop on top as well. And I'm just going to start to roll the paste out. Now I don't want this to be super thin. I want it to be thicker than if I was making like rose petals, for example. It's quite a large size to it, so we don't want it really thin and flimsy. But we also don't want it really thick and heavy either. So I've got this veinner here from Alderval. It's the Arum Lily veinner. The reference is 8068 if you want to search for it online, from Alderval. Okay, so we're just popping the rolled out paste on there, and we're just going to press it lightly into position and then pop the other part of the veinner on top and push down all over. And we're going to use the veinner to actually determine the shape, and we're going to cut it out manually. Okay, so you can just see there the lovely veining that's come through. I'm just going to press it back in a little bit more here. Okay, and then we're going to peel that off. So you can see it's veined on the front and the back, and it's come through quite nicely. So just take your craft knife and use the impression that the veinner has made to cut round. You don't need a spare cutter for this, a separate cutter. You can just use the shape of the veinner. But if you have some cutters and you want to use them, you can go ahead. But you don't need to buy them specially for this technique. So I've just transferred it to my foam pad, and I've got my big ball tool here, and I'm just going to very gently go around the very edge just to soften that edge off. So obviously we've cut it with a craft knife, so that edge is currently sort of quite blunt, quite sharp, and we're just going to soften it off a little bit with the ball tool. So my aim here isn't to create sort of any ruffles or to change the shape or the size of the petal. It's just to soften that edge so that it's thin on the edge. It still has sort of thickness and stability in the middle, but that edge we want to be finer, so we don't want it chunky looking. So we've just taken the ball tool around and just given it that thinness on the edge. At this stage, if you want to flip the petal over and add some extra movement in with your Dresden tool, you absolutely can do that. So just pulling in from the sides and curling those edges in. So curling them back. If you look at calla lilies, they can at first appear quite uniform, but actually there is quite a bit of nice movement and variation in them from one flower to the next. So do try and get some calla lilies in front of you, or have a look at some pictures online and just have a look at the movement that there is, because there's definitely more than first meets the eye. Okay, and you can go ahead and pinch that end and give it a little twist if you want. So now we're going to combine the two elements. So we've got our centre that we've dusted, and we've got our outer petal. And we're just going to place some glue. This is just edible glue, and position our centre to begin with. And then we're going to pop some more glue so that we can roll this over. Pop a little bit on your centre as well. And we're going to fold one side over first. And you can do this while the centre is still setting, but please be careful if you are. We don't want to rip it off that wire. And then fold the other half over. Okay, and just position that where you want it. Just pinch that at the bottom to make sure it's properly adhered. If you need to, just hold it upside down to do that. And then we don't want it to dry on a flat surface. We want to keep any movement in it that's sort of natural to the calla lily shape. So we've just gone ahead and put the whole flower into a piece of foil, which I have bent into a U shape. So here's the profile, and you can see it's narrower at one end and wider at the other to follow the shape of the calla lily. And then I've popped that onto a floral foam, a dimpled foam, just so that this end bit can just hang over nicely, and we can create this profile, which I'll just grab another one here to show you. We can create this profile here of the tip, just by that hanging over the end of the foam, sorry. Go ahead and leave that overnight to firm up, and then the next day you'll be able to come and tape it. So to finish off our flower, I've got some additional 20 gauge wires, which are going to thicken our stem to make it more of the width and look that you would expect from a calla lily. And I've got some petal dusts here, so I've got 3 petal dusts from Fractal. I've got the moss green, the dark green, and the grass green. And as I open these, you should hopefully be able to see 3 different shades of green. And obviously, depending upon the project you're working on, you might want to lean towards a lighter green, you might want to lean towards a darker green, or somewhere in the middle. But these 3 give you a nice range. And then we're also going to be using some green florist tape as well. So you can either keep the stems full, so this one is like the full length of the florist wires here, which look amazing arranged on a cake, or you could of course cut them short and just long enough to insert into a flower pick and insert inside the cake, or you can have them somewhere in between. So this one, just for ease of showing you on the camera, has been cut down slightly from the full length, but it will still give you a nice calla lily finish at the end. So to begin with, I've got my florist tape ready. I've just got a section that's workable at the moment, and I'm just positioning these additional wires to thicken out the base. So I'll position those towards the top and get those secured. So activate your florist tape just by stretching it slightly, and that will give you a small amount of stickiness. And then I'm taking the tape up over the bottom of the join, so over the bottom of the flower paste here, I'm taking it up slightly, and I'm going to blend that in fully with petal dust afterwards. So don't worry if it looks like a really straight line at this point, because we're going to do some clever blending with petal dust afterwards. And you may find that you need to add a few more wires in just to get that thickness and shape of the stem, for example. So please do that. Add another couple in if it still doesn't look quite big enough in relation to the actual petal. I'm using half width tape here, but obviously this job would be quicker if it was full width tape. I just only had the half width. So you can use either on this job. Okay, so when you get to the end of that length, just grab another length of tape and keep building that up. Just keep winding that round. And what you can do is, if there's certain areas where there's like a little dent in it at this join, you can just sort of target that by wrapping the tape round a few more times in that area, just to build it out without obviously putting another wire in. So I'm just going to wrap it around this bit a little bit more, just to build that neck up a little bit, and then take it back down again. And obviously just be careful with your flower at this stage. We don't want to knock this on anything as we're twisting the stem round. We don't want to knock the head of the flower and smash it. I'm just going to clip that bottom bit off. Another stretch of tape. Just want to really make that as a softer gradient as possible on that stem, going down from the full width here down to the stem. I don't want it to be obvious. I want it to be a really smooth, gradual reduction in thickness. Okay, so when you've finished thickening out the stem and taping it up, we are ready to dust. So I'm going to start off with the moss green here, and I'm just going to start at that join, start on the tape and blending up onto the petal and really rubbing. I've got quite a stubby brush here, I'm not wanting for it to go everywhere. I'm wanting it to be able to rub in exactly where I want it. And I'm wanting to start looking like I'm blending that join. And you can bring some of the yellow into this as well if you wanted. So get the brush that you had from the yellow from the centre, and you can just brush a little bit of yellow at the back. Not sure how much that's showing up on camera. You can just pop a little bit of yellowy in there if you wanted, and just to blend that in. But where you've got any kind of visible join where it's not quite picking up, just go in with a slightly darker bit, just to really get into any sort of crevice or join. And then when you've barely got any left on your brush, that's when you can kind of take it a little bit higher, just to pull it up slightly, but really in the most subtle of ways. And there we go, nicely blended. So that hopefully that join has become almost invisible between the tape where the wires are and the actual gum paste or flower paste. And there we go, 3 beautifully finished calla lilies using the Aldeval veiner and a craft knife. Let me know if you give it a go. I would love to see what you create. Obviously there are loads of different colourways as well, some really beautiful options out there for this flower. So please do tag me if you do make the flower and give it a go, either in your pictures of the flowers that you create or even the cakes that you arrange your flowers on. I always love to see. Don't forget there are loads of other free resources on this YouTube channel, so please do subscribe. I'll be updating the channel with more free tutorials this year. And of course, there is my free Facebook group, the Sugarcraft School with Rachel Hanna, which is an incredible community of cake decorators, and a huge amount of resource in there, and of course, support. I hope you've enjoyed today's class, and I look forward to seeing what you do with it.